Thank you very much, Speaker. Honourable Senators, I rise in support of Bill S-241, the Jane Goodall Act. The bill's goals are to better protect wildlife in captivity, enhance public safety, and support conservation. Today, following the debate format popularized by my friend and colleague, Senator Kutcher, I will address 3 points. First, the relationship between federal and provincial jurisdictions with regards to wild animals in captivity. Secondly, the quality of life of captive elephants in Canada. And third, the standards for designating zoos and other animal care organizations under the bill. Before exploring these points, I acknowledge that the welfare of captive animals is a concern for many Canadians, including senators. Indeed, many of us share our lives with domesticated animals such as dogs and cats. Frankly, I'm a dog-loving person, and I'm always joyed by the greetings that our golden doodle Maisie gives me when I return home, whether I have been away for 3 hours, 3 days, or 3 weeks. I also note that my friend and colleague, Senator Ravalia, is an adopted uncle to Maisie, and I enjoy receiving photos of Mac, Senator Wells' beautiful poodle. As a young boy, I spent many summers living and working on a farm, and like some farm-raised senators here, I came away from that experience with wonderment about our relationships with those amazing creatures, cows, chickens, horses, pigs, and others. However, my memories of shoveling out manure in the pig pens are, I must admit, not amongst the highlights of my childhood. But wild animals in captivity are, to mix metaphors, a different kettle of fish. The relationship between humans and wild animals in captivity is complex and evolving. In ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, rulers and aristocrats kept private collections of wild animals, primarily to demonstrate owners' power and status. The larger and more exotic the collection, the more powerful the owner. The word menagerie captures this reality. And such traditions echo today. Michael Jackson and Pablo Escobar, for example, kept extensive menageries on their estates. Zoos with animals for public viewing are a more recent development. In the Western world, the first modern zoo opened in Paris in 1793. This was fundamentally a political act. The private menageries of the king and queen and various aristocrats were put on public display at the Ménagerie du Jardin des Plantes, a tangible evidence of liberté, égalité, and fraternité, but also a nod to providing entertainment for the populace. Today's credible zoos have evolved into settings that promote education, and some have a strong commitment to scientific research and conservation. Enclosures, in many cases, have been developed to more closely approximate natural habitats. The cramped tiger cage with its perpetually pacing cat and the monkey showing signs of boredom, anxiety, and stress are hopefully much less common today. Yet this evolution has not yet concluded, and as our knowledge about wild animals improves, compassionate people will continue to find better ways to cohabit this planet with other species. That's why this bill is important. It's a significant next step demonstrating Canada's international leadership in creating a better life for wild animals in captivity. If passed, this bill will create a transparent and accessible legal standard for animal care, organizations that meet 5 criteria: the highest standard of animal care, whistleblower protection, no use of animals in circus-style shows, responsible acquisition of animals, and additional government standards based on expert consultation. We know from World Animal Protection Canada reports and numerous news stories that we need to do more to protect the well-being of wild animals in captivity with a sense of urgency. Legislation is necessary to shepherd this work along, and this is why we should move the bill forward to committee as soon as possible. I'm hopeful that that study will commence early in the new year, and I look forward to hearing from Dr. Jane Goodall and other experts, including leading Canadian zoos and animal welfare organizations. Now, the first of the 3 topics that I mentioned, the relationship between federal and provincial jurisdiction with regards to wild animals in captivity. This is a matter that Senator Plett has previously and appropriately raised, with concern that much legislation relating to animal protection is in the provincial sphere. Others have informed me that there is also federal jurisdiction in this domain. Now, in addition to our rural boyhoods, I believe Senator Plett and I share the distinction that neither of us is a legal expert. That said, I would like to make some observations on jurisdiction. But please, as I do so, keep in mind that physicians, although we can hold a high and perhaps misguided regard for our expertise in various areas of life, such as international finance, foreign affairs, quantum mechanics, or how to bake sourdough bread, I venture into this part of my speech with some trepidation. I note also that the committee can hear from experts on legal aspects of the bill. Bill S-241 proposes animal welfare restrictions on the international and interprovincial transport of live wild animals from affected species by amending the Wild Animal and Plant Protection and Regulation of International and Interprovincial Trade Act. As I understand it, trade across these boundaries is an area of exclusive federal jurisdiction under its trade and commerce power. For an example of animal welfare restrictions in federal trade laws, I refer us to Section 23.2 of the Fisheries Act, restricting the import and export of live whales and dolphins, which was enacted in 2019. Bill S-241 also exercises federal jurisdiction over criminal animal cruelty and public safety under federal criminal power. Since 2019, Section 445.2 of the Criminal Code has contained captivity-related offenses with respect to whales and dolphins, prohibiting unlicensed breeding as well as performance for entertainment purposes. This section protects these creatures' physical health, psychological well-being, and dignity from cruel or degrading treatment. With this bill, Parliament would expand those captivity offenses to provide additional protection for wild species, while allowing licenses for justifiable purposes subject to potential conditions. Bill S-241 does not create new criminal offenses, but modifies existing ones. Because many of the added species are dangerous, the bill also protects public safety. Provincial jurisdiction on wild animals in captivity coexists via provinces' property and civil rights power. Provincial legislation covers negligent treatment and patchwork regional ownership restrictions. However, all captive animals have long been subject to federal criminal animal cruelty restrictions on their treatment. In other words, as I understand it, the subject of captive wild animals is an area of both federal and provincial jurisdiction. The bill's preamble states that the subject of captive wild animals has what is known constitutionally as a double aspect of shared jurisdiction. I understand that the bill allows some dual licensing for that reason, following the same legal model as the whale and dolphin laws. A committee can hear more, but we have not heard any arguments on debate that the federal trade or criminal jurisdiction is invalid. With Bill S-241, the question is not whether Parliament can help protect wild animals in captivity. The question is whether it should. And in my opinion, the answer is that it must. My second issue is the quality of life of captive elephants. Undeniably, the best place for elephants is the wild, or if in captivity, large outdoor spaces in a warm climate. They're highly intelligent, socially complex, and physically wide-ranging. Elephants frequently experience physical suffering and psychological distress in captivity, exhibiting problems such as abnormal and repetitive behaviors, higher infant mortality, and reduced lifespan. In fact, according to a 2019 New York Times article, in captivity in North America, for every elephant born, 2 have died. The same article describes a psychiatric disorder seen in captive elephants, one, frankly, I had not known about until I began to research the issue, zoochosis. a form of mental illness that develops in animals held captive in zoos. It often manifests as unnatural stereotypic behaviors that include rocking or swaying, pacing, self-mutilation, and more. The article takes this further, stating, quote, "One of the more disturbing manifestations of zoo elephant psychosis is the high incidence of stillbirths and reproductive disorders amongst pregnant mothers. Even when births are successful, there are often instances not only of infant mortality, but also of calf rejection and infanticides, something almost never witnessed in thousands of studies of wild elephant herds," end quote. In addition, we need to consider another reality for captive elephants in Canada, our cold weather. All 4 Canadian locations with elephants keep them indoors in the winter. These conditions are far removed from those that support their innate social, physical, and psychological needs. According to the Born Free Foundation, the unnatural size of these enclosures and the conditions within them amplify the adverse psychological and behavioral impacts of captivity, as well as leading to other health problems, including foot ulcers and obesity. Honorable Senators, toxic environments damage the physical and mental health of elephants, just as they do for humans. In June, over 20 elephant scientists and other experts, including global leaders in their field, endorsed Bill S-241's proposed phase-out of elephant captivity in Canada. In a letter sent to senators, they described elephants' extensive health problems in captivity and the constraints on their needs, including by keeping them indoors in the winter and the practice of chaining captive elephants. Senators have received correspondence from many different organizations regarding the issues of the health and well-being of captive elephants. The committee will need to carefully consider all the evidence, while I trust prioritizing the health and well-being of these magnificent creatures. Now, my third point. The executive director of CAZA, C-A-Z-A, has communicated to senators his desire for members of his organization to be deemed as animal care organizations under Bill S-241. For such a designation, the legislation requires organizations to administer, quote, "the highest professionally recognized standards and best practices of animal care," end quote, as well as meeting other criteria such as refraining from performance for entertainment. I've spoken to Senator Klein about this issue, as well as doing my own research on zoo accreditation. I also know that Senator Platt has recently appropriately raised the issue of zoo accreditation with Senators Dean and Sorensen in this chamber. I have learned that some consultations with stakeholders have indicated that the Canadian members of the Associations of Zoos and Aquariums, AZA, uphold higher standards and practices than those who only hold accreditation from a different organization, CAZA, Canada's Accredited Zoos and Aquariums. Others have seen this issue from a different lens. In my discussions with Senator Klein, I have learned that he is open to an amendment that would provide for automatic designations of any Canadian zoos meeting AZA standards within the first number of years, as well as an independent review of CAZA standards and practices. Perhaps this is an important issue to be considered by committee. Whatever the outcome is regarding accreditation, this issue requires the in-depth analysis that only committee study can provide. To conclude, in my view, the Jane Goodall Act is a credit to the Senate and to Canada, showing we can lead the way on protecting wild animals. I add my voice to those of the many colleagues here eager to move to our second reading and a committee study of the bill. Thank you. Merci. Euladio.
Senator Platt,
is there any time for questions, or is it?
There's about 40 seconds left, so in order to have time to answer it, Senator Kutcher would have to ask for 5 minutes. You asking for 5 minutes to answer questions? Senator Kutcher?
Certainly, Speaker, if that would please
Okay.
Chamber.
Is it agreed, honourable senators? Senator Platt.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker. Well, just a couple of notes. Senator, we are told that it is urgent to pass this bill. You alluded to that today. But, Senator, are you aware that on the day that this bill passes into law, there will not be a single roadside zoo that will be closed because of it? Every animal currently in a roadside zoo is grandfathered, or any zoo is grandfathered, and indeed will be left to die under the deplorable conditions that people are referring to. But while it will be doing nothing for the animals in roadside zoos today, the bill will do immediate harm to great conservation work done by 18 zoos, which are fully accredited by Canada's accredited zoos and aquariums, by restricting their ability to breed and creating a chill over possibly losing their animals. You and others have alluded to the elephants and other animals being social activities. They will be left to die in the places that they are. They will not be allowed to breed. For a social animal to do something to prevent their breeding, I would say, is a whole lot crueler than having them there. Can you explain to me, since this does nothing to these zoos, and I'm not suggesting it not go to committee, but what is the rush when it will do nothing at all to prevent any of these zoos having the animals that they already have?
Senator Kutcher.
Thank you very much for that important question, Senator Platt. I understand that the legislation is not focused on closing zoos. You're absolutely correct about that. You may want to make an amendment to it, thinking about it. It is, however, focused on protection of animals held in captivity and ensuring their well-being. First of all, the bill will phase out harmful practices. Second, it will encourage responsible relocations of animals. They won't die in place. There are opportunities for responsible relocations. In my understanding, some zoos have already identified that they would be willing to take these relocations. So an important consideration, but I think one that zoos have thought about in preparation for this, and it's a good point that you make. The bill also provides a mechanism of enforcement that will, over time, protect animals. And I think that's a good thing, and I think you would agree with me that that's a good thing as well.
Senator Platt.
Senator Kutcher, Charlie Gray is the superintendent of elephants at African Line Safari. He has worked hands-on with elephants since 1982, has been the elephant manager at African Line Safari since 1987. Charlie is a founding board member of the Elephant Managers Association and is a founding and current board member of the International Elephant Foundation. He served on American Associations of Zoos and Aquariums, Taxon Advisory Group for the Asian Elephant Species Survival Program from 1988 to 2019. He is a world-renowned elephant expert. Charlie told us, Senator Kutcher, that contrary to what you have said and other so-called experts would have us believe, the elephants in their care and their love in the 4 seasons, all 4 seasons. This is partly because most of the herd of Asian elephants were born and raised in Canada. They've never been in Asia and are very acclimatized to our winters. In fact, Charlie says their elephants actually prefer the cold to the heat, partly because there are no bugs. And they also love to run and play in the snow and break the ice on the lake and go swimming. They have heated enclosures that are large enclosures. They are not in cages, where they can come and go as they please, doors that they open themselves as they come in and out of the cold. Now, have you spoken to any of these? I have visited more zoos in the last 2 years than I have been in my life. These facilities that they have, they are huge facilities. These elephants are no longer being ridden, although certainly what they experience in their home country, they are being ridden, they are being used to haul stuff, to carry stuff, to drag stuff. And yet here they're being treated cruelly by not having to do any of that and living not in enclosures, but in a wildlife, I'm sorry, did you have a question, Senator Gagne?
I'm sorry, Senator Platt, but
Could you explain how you square that box when this renowned expert is saying the opposite of what you and whoever you talk to is saying?
sorry, Senator Kutcher, well, your time has expired. Are you asking for more time? No. I hear a no. Senator Martin.
The adjournment to the debate.
Moved by the Honourable Senator Martin, seconded by the Honourable Senator Seidman, that further debate be adjourned until the next sitting of the Senate. It's a pleasure, Honourable Senators, to adopt the motion. Adopt